Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today we have special guest Yvette Dubel. She has been called your go to person for the perfect blend of creativity, insight, and ability to connect. Yvette is a speaker, artist, researcher, and personal innovator mentor, founding CEO of WebAntiphon
Antiphon.
Antiphon Group, author of Why Brand Risk Management Innovation is a Game Changer and a Cure for Racism, as well as creator of the Empowered Innovation System. She serves conscious leaders looking for outside the box thinking with vision and wisdom to drive triple bottom line success, profit, people, and planet. So that is wonderful. Welcome to the show, Yvette.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sheila.
Yes, and I'd like to start off by this show actually came about based on my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps: The Formula to Go from Rock Bottom Back into Action in Any Situation. I wrote it right before the pandemic, and I couldn't even fathom these situations. So, do you have maybe a time that you could share with the audience in your business or personal life where you experienced a tough situation and how you got back on track?
Sure. Well, I really relate to what you said. My Empowered Innovation System tagline is transforming challenges into launch pads for success. So, very much relate to that. Gosh, I've had so many times. um, let's see, I'm trying to think of a recent one. Um, well, I would say when I started the film festival in 2020, that was an act of hope and optimism. That
Mhm.
was what came out of that despair of the moment, and needing to find some faith in humanity. And I guess I had like this vision, this dream of what we, the world, where that could take a film festival in terms of merging those missions, those visions. And so the We Freedom Film Fest is a film festival that was started to inspire and encourage filmmakers to make films that would encourage us to think about and imagine and envision what a better world looks like, a better world that works for all of us and how we get there. Because I noticed the trend for the last 20 or so years being very dystopian.
Yeah.
Um, and it's as if there's a real lack of imagination and that people can't fathom a future that is better than our past.
Wow, yes, that's so true. So now, how did you get back on track through that, or how did you get through that to what you're doing now? How did that show up?
Well, the system actually came about when I was working with a coach
Mhm.
to turn what I had been doing into something I could teach other people. Because I was really, frankly, having a great time just doing the artist research
Mhm.
bit and occasionally, collaborating and writing or contributing, something on what I was finding or what I was thinking about. And I did not think that I really had the right temperament
Mhm.
initially to kind of work one on one with people. And I really wanted to make my contribution um, more at arm's length through technology.
Mhm.
And as more and more people were telling me that I needed to be out there teaching more, you should be telling people about this, you should be talking about this. And so my coach helped me take what I had been doing really since my late teens and turn that into a system that I could teach other people.
Uh-huh.
And so, there's seven empowered innovation principles that I pretty much, live by. One of the ones that I really love that comes to mind is, I think it's number five. You are what you do, not what you say.
Mm, yes.
Um,
Yes.
and that's one that brings me back. So the principles are like touchstones that bring me back. And so using art, that's my artist practice has been a real godsend for me. And just kind of like using all the tools that you accumulate, during that. I talk about personal innovation as opposed to personal development,
Mm,
because personal innovation really helps you to redefine your success, to consider the impacts on others as you're doing that personal growth work.
mhm.
And so everything that I've done has been sort of geared towards this. And so when Kristen Thompson helped me put this together into a cohesive system, it just made sense. So A Cure for Racism was that was what that came from. That was our Martin Luther King piece, 20 days I think it's 40 days of peace, I'm sorry, was applying that system to the problem of racism. And that was how
Yes.
A Cure for Racism came about. So that was another time that I was in a very the depths of despair after the George Floyd murder and all of that had happened. And after I finally watched the recording, that was what came from that.
Yes, yes, that was very recent then. And this is
Yes.
something that, coming from myself, I have adopted 3 kids, 3 of my own, and a multicultural
Wow.
family for sure. And I love my babies, and now they're adults, and they were treated differently depending on how they showed up. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, but it's the way it is. And so it's a very different situation, and you're not aware of it as much unless it's yourself or someone you love close to you. That it doesn't make sense. How is this happening? And I believe it goes into even the school systems. The systems overall are so broken. I campaigned for 20 years for equal education for all because we don't have that in the United States at all. It's based on zip code. It's based on how much money you have. And then the really high earning zip codes, the parents donate another couple million a year to these kids. And then there's areas where the schools are terrible. So it's really an important situation. And I remember being on this interview. It was a big interview back in the day with all this going on when I first started. And my children were very young, and I realized, wait, this isn't okay. What's going on in the schools? Why is this child treated differently than this other child? I've got all these kids. What's going on? And I was on this interview, and it was at USC, and it was about education and this whole system situation. And I said, I just want you to imagine. Now, this was a long time ago. I said, I want you to imagine you're on your deathbed, you're in the hospital, and the one person that could have saved you is the one you denied the education to. And everybody was like, whoa. And I was like, and right now with that, it really is something to hear, because the one person that has cured all this COVID, all this crazy stuff, is the one when we deny one person, we deny everybody. There's everybody gets hurt. It's a terrible thing.
I totally agree. I teach my framework that I use I call it the soul food framework. And so I use the metaphor of cooking and recipes. So the solution we want the solution's recipes, right? And when you look at racism, and when we talk about systemic racism, the only way that enters the system is when individuals bring it as an ingredient, as part of self. And so my work in personal innovation is really about helping people to confront and address that in their work of refining the ingredient of self, which is the ingredient that you bring to everything you see, witness, or experience. And so if we want to see transformation, we want to see change, that's the place to begin, because these systems persist because so many people depend on them and require them for their success. And so that's the reason that I focus on helping people to redefine their success, to consider the impacts on other people, because it's something that if you're a shareholder, there's some people that don't work, they simply live off of their investments, and so they're shareholders, and all of these big companies, they have more power than we do as consumers, because that company exists to produce profits for them. Satisfying us and their employees is just a means to an end. Right. You see what I mean? But if you redefine success, as an organization, and so when part of my website says, if you think that another certificate is the solution, you're wrong. And the evidence proves that, we've been doing corporate trainings about diversity inclusion, and many studies show, and looking, I think they looked at over 1,000 different corporate training programs, and actually found that it made situations worse.
Wow.
It didn't improve them. And when you were talking about education, I actually homeschooled my 3 kids.
Yeah.
So I do understand. And I was very much a victim of exactly what you're talking about in schools growing up in the South. And I've done interviews and I've told this story before, but in kindergarten, I think that if I'd been somewhere else, I'm sure I would have skipped a grade or 2. But because of the system being what it was, she didn't even want to put me in the gifted program. And so my mother had to raise quite a stink because, and the compromise ended up being, rather than have me be slowed down by the work that, because they were, doing phonics and letters, and I already knew how to read and write. So a teacher worked with me in the back of the room on first grade material or whatever it was. So it's like in a different time or a different place, I would have skipped a grade or 2, but I wasn't given that opportunity. And so the same thing happened, when it's time for college. And I don't know, how old are your kids?
Oh my gosh. Well, now we're getting into my age, but my youngest is 22 and my oldest is 32.
Oh, we're in the same range. We're good. My oldest is 30 and my youngest is 25.
Yeah. So
we're in the same range.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean then. So it's it is a challenge, but I think that homeschooling helped us avoid some of that, because a lot of it was not wanting them to have to overcome the sort of programming and the messaging that I got as a young person, and about my value or lack of value for that matter. So that's why we do what we do, right?
Right. And there were years that I homeschooled, and sometimes I couldn't pay for private. So I literally got a certificate as a Montessori teacher and had them get to go free because they're 6. So, when you do the math on that, that's a lot of kids to pay for their private schooling. But I did that because of that exact reason.
Right.
And we're going to go do these things together. And I was really concerned about the situation in the schools, and it was ridiculous. My oldest actually had a speech problem, and he had ear infections and since birth, and he couldn't hear. So then he had to do speech therapy. And with that, when I brought him to school, his last name was a Spanish last name. And they wanted to put him in the ESL. But he couldn't even say words in English. And I was like, he doesn't speak Spanish. Not that we don't, have grandparents that speak Spanish. And we love them. And later he will learn Spanish, but he's already getting picked on for not being able to speak at all. So how are you going to add another language? And they were like, well, we need it for the funding. And because the last name fits, that's
wow.
And I was like, now that's just ridiculous. And so we left. And we're like, that's
reduced to a pawn.
Yes, but it put on my heart. I said, wait a minute, what this does not make any sense. And that's why I started doing all the campaigning for equal education for all. So that was such a gift, that really sometimes the obstacles, the way, and it's the grassroots efforts that make all the difference. And so that it 20 years, and I still to this day, we just had a big thing that we did. A friend of mine did something with Block High School, which is a school in, I believe it's Louisiana, that they had no funding, public school. And we got funding for them and all these different things. It was beyond believable how bad it was. And so it's still, there's so much work to be done. Really.
Indeed, absolutely. It is a whole nother ball game if you don't have the money. And looking, I have a lot of friends who are educators, and one of the things that really surprised me was these sort of pots of private money within the public schools, where wealthy parents contribute to programs for their kids, but that money is not for the student body as a whole. That was something that I didn't realize, because I thought that as a PTA sort of initiative that, that meant that it was for everybody. But apparently that is not how it works. And apparently that is the new trend of
Mm.
sort of private school within the public school. And I think added to that is, or maybe fueling some of that, well, I won't say fuel, it will exacerbate it because it existed before this started. But now that we have states like North Carolina passing laws about how you can teach racism,
Mm-hmm.
and not being able to talk about systemic racism or use those sorts of terms, or because I was completely miseducated as a child. I was actually told that we didn't have slavery in Pitt County, where I grew up, which made, of course, no sense. Um, but even up until the year 2000, when they did the Millennium Calendar, which was when I moved back to North Carolina, and I was looking at the calendar, and at the time I was working on a project about oral traditions. Oral
Mm.
tradition is history for the region. And in the calendar, so it has like the oldest buildings, the oldest streets, that kind of thing. And there was one for Dickinson Avenue, which is the street I lived on when I graduated high school. And it was like the oldest road into town. And so they have pictures of these men standing there with these cars and trucks behind them. And they list the names of all of the white men and their trucks, but not the black men.
Mm.
So I'd gone to find out, if I see if I could find out who the men were, to try and find out what families, if I see if I knew their families. And while I was down there, I ran into somebody and started talking about how I was given this misinformation about there not being slavery in Pitt County and how ridiculous it was, and that this seems sort of racist, that you mentioned like even the cars of the white men, but you completely ignore the black men that are in the picture. That seemed weird. And so several people and this is the Chamber of Commerce office, got really upset with me and insisted that that was not true, that we did not
Mm.
have slavery here. So I went to the library and got a copy of a census report and brought it back to them to show them that these farmers listed the number of slaves that they had. And you see at the top, it says Pitt County. And these were like 50-something-year-old women, so
They kind of knew.
well, they didn't believe it because that's the narrative that they tell. Like when I asked about what happened to the Native Americans here, they told me they just left. Now this was like when I was 9. So I didn't learn about the Trail of Tears, for a few years. But it's that kind of miseducation, that a law that does not allow teachers to discuss racism and our racist past is going to exacerbate the problem, because it continues to allow people to believe something that's not true and that's in conflict with the lived experience of a vast majority of like non-white people.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories that we have been told and have been handed down in our families. So that's problematic. And are you really educating people when you do that?
And then history will repeat itself over and over again because you don't get to learn the real history.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is the film festival is something that I'm sure it will take a little while to get to the level of a Tribeca, but I feel like it's very needed.
Mm-hmm.
I am looking at what we will do in between the next season, now in the next season, to engage filmmakers more, to have conversations with them more, to really try and understand why there is such a lack of imagination when it comes to imagining what the world is like if we rise to the occasion.
Mm.
Um, and it's telling and it's very sad, but I feel that as more people start to do that work and move in that direction, the 20/80 rule, we only need 20% of the people
Yeah.
to
That's
bring the rest of us along.
Oh, my young adults are all so into politics this last couple years more than ever, because of everything going on, and very involved with everything. And there's something about it. I think the universe is conspiring in our best interest in a way, because now a lot of people have to homeschool. Guess what? Guess what? It's like God, source, whatever, said, you know what? This
Right,
is
right.
so wrong. I'm shutting you down. It's over. Go home. You're better off at home right now. And so this is changing the way I'm wondering what the future is going to look like with these children right now, growing up in this time where they may never have had homeschool or been home as much with family, but now they're getting the wisdom from the oral traditions, right? Those stories
Right. The
happening, and
different generations.
yes, and they're getting that, and they haven't had that. And the values, this is home, this is our values. This is you run it through discernment. You go to school again, you have this discernment from our values, from our
Right.
family values. And so then they can say, oh, okay, well, that's interesting what they're saying, but it doesn't align with my values. And so that's going to be a gift. I think we're creating some incredible leaders right now.
We sure need them, don't we? I mean, there's a lot of, well, I won't say a lot, but there's a few educational bills. I know DeSantis in Florida is looking to have like a litmus test, to, he doesn't want free thinkers. He
No,
doesn't want
no.
Florida universities producing free thinkers,
Oh,
and cutting funding.
yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting because I think that what they may end up doing, because the college enrollment has been down,
Mhm.
that's a problem for a lot of college towns, wondering what they're going to do. Their whole economic, I know in the South, it's very much still, I mean, a plantation economy. It's just the plantations have changed, but that still is sort of the way of thinking. There's not that distribution, there's not that inclusion.
Right.
So I think that, sort of this may be the slow breaking down that's needed for something new to emerge. And we did, gosh, what was the event? I can't remember what the event was. Oh, it was the Global Day of Unity. I did an embodied performance with some of the people that have been mentors and teachers for me, around having a conversation about the need for something other than just the normal political action, that we really have to look at how we are showing up, our very embodiment.
Mhm.
Otto Schwarmer, who was another one of my early influences, wrote a book. It has a whole institute now based on this work called Theory U. And Theory U says that the outcome that you get is directly related to the place within that you're coming from when you take that action.
Wow. I love
And right.
that. It's true.
So I feel that if more of us can embody that, we can come at this in a way. My mother used to always say, you don't fight somebody in their own kitchen. And I kind of feel like that's what we're doing with the politicians that are passing all of these, pushing through these oppressive bills. But at the same time, I always encourage people, especially young people, but everybody, to remember that leaders, political leaders, business leaders, everybody, they have that power because we have given it to them. And we need to seriously reconsider what it takes and what it means to take that power back and reallocate it.
Right. Right. It's really voting with your actions. If
Well, now that they're rigging the voting, it's going to
uh,
have to be more than
it,
that.
yeah,
They're changing the rules so that they
oh,
can literally do
mm,
what they want.
right, right. But it comes down to if a school's really not serving your kids, pull them out. If a business isn't serving you or your family, don't shop there. If and it, People will respond, and that's just it works. That's the best way to do things. Sometimes let them know, but then show them with
Yes.
the
Yes.
actions, and
I think we're going to
that's
have to get creative about how we show them now. I mean, I don't know how much you know about like the laws that they're passing, but allowing people to come. I know Texas passed one where you can come in with guns and no free no carry permit required. You don't have to have a carry permit or any training to carry in public. Allowing people free reign in the voting polls, which means while you're voting, somebody can come and look over you, ask you questions about your vote. That's a real throwback to racial intimidation.
oh,
Um, so that's very concerning, and hopefully that will not escalate, because those of us that live in these gun states where everybody has a gun, most
right.
people I know have at least 7 or 8 guns.
Wow.
So what I mean, if everybody's just showing up with guns at polling places, that's problematic.
That is that is not that's like I'm not gonna go vote if you're full of guns over here. That's crazy.
So it's like crazy things are happening. And I think we're just going to have to get a little bit more creative. And also, just before we wrap this up, another thing is so much attention on the middle class and support for the middle class. And I think it's also important to remind our politicians and representatives that there are poor people and that they vote too, and that they need help. Um, and that it's not, that during the pandemic, some people think it was a bad thing that people who were in service positions were able to take classes to get better paying jobs. I thought that was the American dream.
Yes. That is I think it's a great thing.
But some people believe that people should be in a desperate situation, so that they will take whatever opportunity, whatever job, is open and available to them, and not really thinking about their quality of life. And I think that that's one of the upsides of the pandemic, is a lot of people have realized how much more they want to be with their families. And they want jobs that will allow that. And they want jobs that will not leave them unemployed if a pandemic happens,
Right.
something where they could work from home. So I'm encouraged to see more people talking about that, a little bit more inclusion of people at different socioeconomic, statuses being included in the conversation. So progress happens one conversation at a time.
Yes. Now I'd love to hear about the 3 Ps.
Oh, people, planet, profit.
Yes, and how that came about, and how you teach on that. And
Okay. I wish I could take credit for it. It was not me. I don't know exactly who created it, but I found out about it back when we were looking at different kinds of organizations, and they were creating a business class, sort of a social enterprise business class, and looking at some tax benefits related to that. And I was interested in how social impact bonds could be developed and used to support something like that. So anyway, people, planet, profit. And so the idea was that was what those kinds of enterprises would prioritize. Like, it wouldn't just be about profit. And that when you, like I was saying before, it's like, typically a business is in business to make money for their shareholders. The people and the planet are kind of like a means to an end, right? And so one of the things I help people do is to think about how to translate that into your legacy, your business. And so, for example, one of the things that I am advocating for and encouraging people to think about is taking responsibility for your product from manufacturer to end of life cycle. And so some states are beginning to help work with businesses to create that infrastructure to be able to do that. But that is one of the things that is going to have to happen. How do we begin to live lives that create less waste? I don't know how much you know about our waste problem and shipping it to other places, and they're like, we don't want it anymore.
Well, yes, I hear in some places, I forget, I think it's Singapore, where they take the waste and they make power from it.
There are some places that have learned that technology came, I want to say like the early 2000s. I read about that, and then you didn't hear any more about it.
Yeah, they're using it over there, and I just saw an article about it, and I was like, wow, that would be pretty impressive.
And the waste, I think they can reduce it so that it's just water left over, the very little waste left over. So there's not been a real embrace of that kind of thing here, and you have to think about why. And it's because of the disruption that it causes to established industries and how strong their lobbyists are. I don't know if you remember this, but years ago, there was like a TV commercial, like one of those 1995 things for pantyhose that didn't run. Do you remember this?
Well, I never found a pair yet, so.
Well, okay, Hanes bought them out and stopped manufacturing of it.
Oh, wow.
So that's the way that it works here. That's how innovation is stomped out. The biggest competitor, software tech companies, have been doing it for ages. They buy a company.
Don't run. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, darn it.
Because I looked it up, I was like, whatever happened to the companies? Like, Hanes bought them, and they stopped manufacturing it. And so that's the sort of thing that happens here with innovation. And so that's part of why we have to. I personally have reached a point of, I don't think government has never been the place of innovation. Innovation doesn't happen in government. We innovate and government catches up. And I feel that people have kind of lost sight of that. And it's like, we need to be making those moves and make them follow us, not like chase behind them and say, please, please, please. They're supposed to be working for us. They've forgotten.
That's right. That's right. And that is so interesting. It's something when you put people first, everything else shows up.
Right.
Now, I had gift stores. At 23 years old, I opened my first store. I had all these stores, and they helped provide for my children for many years. The heart of my store was I came out of the foster care system. I ended up going through and creating a training program for children that were emancipating young adults from the foster care system that nobody wants to hire. Over 200 kids over the years went through my training program. After 6 months, they got the best jobs in town, highest paying at a bigger, better store than even mine. But it blessed my business, and it was the people could feel it,
Right.
and they bought from us. They would drive an extra half an hour in LA. That's the way it is. You drive so far just to buy from the store. And so no matter what you're doing, even if it's something like, how does gift stores selling stuff, how does that help people? Well, you can figure out a creative, resourceful way to make sure that it goes with your heart work.
Right.
And that I don't think about, I sold so many candles and so many knickknacks. I think about, who did I serve? And that's it. That's the difference. And every night I was like, I'm doing my work on this planet, and I feel
Right.
good about that.
I
So
love that story. And that's one of my dreams is several of the people that I'm working with now, one of the conditions was I am helping them create their programs, and I want them to offer their programs to kids that are aging out of group homes, because that's one of the things that has been on my heart for a long time. I thought I wanted to be a foster mom, and it turns out I don't. But I am still, that's very much on my mind, and thinking about how can we help young people that are coming out of foster care and group home situations that don't have a support going into figuring out what they want to do and how to do it. And specifically, I'm looking at programs that can help creatives, writers, and people who are sort of creatively inclined, because that's certainly an industry where you have to be innovative. You have to find a way to kind of pair up your talent with a market need. And I'm kind of excited about what that might lead to. So it's wonderful to learn that you have that background.
Yes,
So I'll
yes.
definitely be reaching out to you as this
Thank you.
develops.
It all aligns, so that's perfect. And my daughter, actually, who's I think she's the 25-year-old. I have to think about it with all these kids.
Right.
She's actually studying psychology and already has worked 4 years in a special group home for young girls that have babies. And so
wow.
babies, and that's what she does. So it kind of, because she grew up in this world, and so she's very good. And she's getting her psychology licensing degree, so she's still going to school full time also. And she's just good with the kids. And so it's something that's really important to us as well. So definitely
I love that.
help with that. And
there's such a need, it's like that's part of like realizing that we're all one big family. And that's kind of my feeling behind it. And what I would like to share with them is that, we're all your family.
Exactly. They're my family. I grew up in the group home and foster care a lot of my life. And so that is my family in a big way. And so it's very important to me. And a lot of times you'll see young people that give up because nobody just gave them the opportunities, the help, and also believed in them. And being present. So if you're listening in right now and you want to get involved, maybe you don't want to be a full-time foster parent, you can do a respite care parent, you can go help out at a group home, and maybe you're a business leader, you can go speak at the home. If you're an author, a consultant, a coach, you can go work with the young teens, or maybe you want to help with emancipation and help with people getting jobs. So there's so many opportunities to help. And each of us, it's not like one magic government thing, like you said, is going to fix it. But each of us going and contributing as we can makes a difference in a big way over time.
That's one of the reasons that I started mentoring was I don't want to be a foster mother, but I can mentor. Um, and I have really enjoyed that. Excuse me. But it's been so great to get the feedback from them when they leave to go whatever they're going off to school and that sort of thing. It's really wonderful to get that sort of feedback from them and um, to have that sort of early input right when they're about to go out into the world, and to remind them never to forget who they are and never to lose sight of what really matters to them, because as you know, so often we start out being very idealistic, but as we get older, some people buy into the idea that we should become more selfish in our pursuit of I don't know, success. And so I remind them, like, don't ever forget what you believe in now, because it matters.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, what's next for you, or what programs and things are you offering that you can share? We're coming to the end of our talking time, so I'd like to hear more about that, and then where people can connect with you.
Okay, sure. Well, I am working on some new offerings for businesses. As I mentioned before, my approach is not a one-day workshop. It's a multi-modular approach. But the cornerstone of the program is really building the trust with people so that they can feel safe and be able to hear and receive the feedback and know that it's coming from a loving place. And you can only do that with time. So that's one of the new things that we're working on. Also working on really kind of like creating more stair step programs within the personal innovation space, because what I found is that people really just don't have a lot of that basic self management, those self management skills. Personal being able to manage their emotions is something that a lot of people just being able to manage their attention, because the backbone of my work is really about attention. It's about coming to understand the value of your attention. And my research work was looking at intangible assets, undervalued intangible assets. Attention is one of the big ones. But most people don't know how to manage their attention. And it's fixed, it's fixed on things in the past. And so it's not, teaching them how to free that up so that they can focus on, the future and the life they want to build, overcoming their fears. So programs, aligned with those, helping people with those things. We're working with a couple of friends to put together some retreats. I probably will have to wait till 2022 because of the way things are going. But we're going to be doing more of those kinds of programs, helping people with more specific aspects of getting to the place where they can tackle some of the bigger personal innovation things of figuring out like their legacy, how to go about building that legacy now, because you're creating your legacy now, whether you realize it or not. So helping people to do that consciously and creating that personal innovation strategy. I have a 5-step strategy that I lead people through. The Cure for Racism, doing more with that and tying some of these other programs into supporting the Cure for Racism. And everything that I am doing is a fundraiser for We the World Freedom Campaign.
All right. So now where can they reach you or learn more about this?
Empoweredinnovation.org or WebAntiphon.com, or you can find me, Yvette Dubel, on LinkedIn or Instagram, or any of those places. I'm around most of those spots.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Yvette, for being a guest on the show. And I really appreciate it. We had a great conversation. So for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. Stay tuned.